Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
All right, so get this. We're diving into homelessness, but not where you might expect. We're talking about Madrid's Barajas airport.
Yeah.
Specifically, Terminal 4, the main international terminal.
Okay.
Yeah, just imagine like stepping off a plane, and instead of like duty-free shops,
Right.
you're met with people who are making the airport their home.
Yeah, it's a very jarring juxtaposition.
Yeah.
This bustling travel hub, this like symbol of global connection,
Right.
also serving as a temporary home for hundreds.
Yeah.
The Local, which is an English language Spanish news site,
Okay.
has a really compelling article on this.
Yeah.
And they highlight the sheer scale of the issue.
The article mentions a 10-fold increase
Wow.
in homelessness at Barajas.
Right?
Over the past decade, from around 40 people to somewhere between 370 and 500 now.
Yeah,
That's a pretty huge jump.
that is a massive increase.
Yeah, and it's not just individuals like discreetly sleeping on benches or anything. We're talking tents,
Wow.
makeshift shelters, the whole works.
So really making a life there almost.
Right. Yeah. It is really fascinating to think about the impact on the airport itself,
Yeah.
because we think of airports as these really transient spaces,
Yeah.
places we just pass through.
You just go from point A to point B.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for some folks, this has become like a place of long-term residence.
Right.
And it raises all these interesting questions about, a place that was really designed for temporary stays,
Right.
adapting to this much more permanent population.
How do you adapt to that?
It's almost like the airport has unintentionally become this like microcosm of society,
Mhm.
reflecting these broader issues of housing affordability and these support systems and things.
Right?
But the article also paints this really like vivid picture of the challenges that this presents,
Yeah.
both for the homeless population and the airport community.
Absolutely. You're dealing with concerns from airport workers
Yeah.
about sanitation, about safety,
Right.
and just like a perceived sense of lawlessness. The article cites some really stark examples.
Yeah, like what?
People using check-in counters as toilets,
Oh, wow.
drug use in restrooms, even reports of public nudity.
That definitely creates a difficult situation for everyone involved. But I'm curious, like, what even draws people to the airport in the first place?
Right.
It's not exactly the most welcoming environment, right?
But I think that's where the irony lies.
Yeah.
The airport, a place of constant transition,
Right.
actually offers a strange sense of security for some. You've got 247 security presence. You've got shelter from the elements, maybe even a feeling of anonymity within this constant flow of travelers.
Right.
It's a complex mix of factors.
Yeah. So you have these people seeking refuge in this place that's designed for like temporary stays.
Yeah.
And it ends up creating this whole other layer of issues.
Right.
The article touches on things like the presence of pickpockets,
Yeah.
unofficial luggage wrappers, even criminal gangs and prostitution.
And that raises the question of security and oversight.
Right.
How are these activities able to persist in an environment that's supposed to be highly controlled?
Yeah.
It suggests maybe gaps in security measures or just a lack of resources to address it.
Right. And then when you consider that the homeless population at Barajas is so diverse,
Yeah.
it makes finding solutions even more complicated, right? You have people who are genuinely homeless. You have folks who have fallen on hard times, maybe even some folks who work but can't afford housing.
Right. It's such an expensive city.
In Madrid's really expensive market, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not a monolithic group at all.
No, it's very diverse.
And that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
And the article points out the presence of asylum seekers,
Right.
individuals who are struggling with mental health
Yeah.
and those battling addiction.
Right.
Each of these groups really requires a very different type of support.
For sure.
There's no one size fits all.
No.
So it's like trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces are constantly shifting. Absolutely.
And from what I gathered in the article, it seems like there's a lot of finger pointing
Oh, yeah.
going on between the airport operator, AENA,
Yeah.
and the local authorities.
Right. It's that blame game.
Right.
It's like who's responsible.
Yeah.
And it just leads to inaction.
Right. And while this back and forth is going on, the article highlights the airport union ASAE
Okay.
criticizing the police for their perceived inaction.
Right.
So it's like all these competing interests and perspectives.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like anyone really has a clear answer.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have all these travelers just coming and going,
Just passing through.
likely unaware of this really complex situation unfolding behind the scenes.
Yeah.
What kind of impact does this have on their experience,
Right.
And how does this reflect on Spain as a tourist destination?
That's a great question. And Spain relies so heavily on tourism.
Right.
And their airports are often the first and last impression visitors have of the country.
So a situation like this at a major hub like Barajas can really have a significant impact on their perception.
Right.
It's not just about the inconvenience. It's about the potential negative associations with the country as a whole.
So we have this really complicated situation playing out at Barajas with no easy answers.
Right.
And potentially some really far-reaching consequences.
Yeah.
But before we get into any of the potential solutions, I think it's important to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture.
The broader context.
Right.
Absolutely. This isn't happening in isolation.
Right.
This is a reflection of a much broader issue.
Yeah.
Homelessness in Spain, or sin techo, as it's known in Spanish. The article mentions there are an estimated 28,000 homeless individuals across the country in 2022.
Yeah.
So this airport, while unique in its setting, is really just one piece of this much larger societal challenge.
And it's not even unique to Madrid. The article briefly mentions similar situations, albeit on a smaller scale. At Barcelona's El Prat Airport and Palma de Mallorca's airport.
So it's happening across the country.
It's happening all over, yeah.
Yeah.
So that suggests that there are some systemic issues at play here.
Absolutely.
It points to the need for national level policies and initiatives to really address homelessness effectively.
For sure.
Not just local or airport specific solutions.
Yeah, it's a nationwide problem.
So we have this national issue playing out in this very specific and visible way at one of Spain's busiest airports.
Right.
And it raises the question, what are the potential solutions being considered?
What are they doing?
And are they even feasible?
Right. Are they even possible?
Given the complexity of the situation.
Yeah, we'll get into that after a quick break.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So the article highlights two main approaches they're considering.
Okay.
Eviction and restricted access.
Okay.
So let's start with eviction.
Okay.
On the surface, it seems like a pretty straightforward solution.
Right. Just remove the homeless population from the airport, problem solved.
Right. But it's not that simple, is it?
Yeah, I'm guessing not. Where do these people go if they're evicted?
Exactly.
It's not like they suddenly have access to housing or support.
Right, and that's where the ethical concerns come in.
Right.
You're essentially just placing a vulnerable population without addressing any of the root causes of their homelessness.
Right.
It's just a reactive measure that could create even bigger problems.
Yeah, imagine pushing hundreds of people out of the airport.
Right.
With nowhere to go.
Exactly. It could lead to increased visibility of homelessness in other parts of the city.
Right.
It could strain resources and social services.
It feels like sweeping the problem under the rug.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with it.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of advocates are arguing for a more humane approach.
Right.
Instead of just removing people, the focus should be on providing support to help them transition out of homelessness.
Okay.
This could involve things like access to affordable housing, mental health services, addiction services, job training, all sorts of assistance tailored to their needs.
So addressing the root causes, not just the symptoms.
Exactly.
And it brings us back to the fact that this population is so diverse at Barajas.
Yeah.
The article talks about asylum seekers who face a whole other set of challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Asylum seekers often arrive with very little.
Right.
They've fled difficult situations in their home countries.
Right.
They might face language barriers, cultural differences,
Yeah.
a complex legal system.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to navigate.
Yeah.
Their needs are very different from someone experiencing homelessness due to economic hardship or other personal circumstances.
So it's not just about providing a bed for the night.
Right.
You're talking about culturally sensitive, linguistically appropriate support services.
Absolutely.
That requires a whole other level of coordination and resources.
For sure. And it brings into focus the role of different government agencies. The article mentions Spain's Ministry of Migration and Inclusion.
Right.
Their mandate is to address these issues, migration and social inclusion.
Makes sense.
So logically, they would play a key role in developing policies and programs to assist these people.
But the article also highlighted that tension between the airport operator and the local authorities.
Right.
Each one kind of passing the buck to the other.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how effective any solution can be if there's no clear ownership.
Right, and that's the danger with these bureaucratic tangles.
Yeah.
You get caught up in who's responsible.
Right.
Instead of focusing on the problem itself.
And while this blame game is going on, the situation just keeps escalating.
Absolutely. It's a classic case of a problem falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fit neatly into anyone's jurisdiction.
So what's the way forward? How do we break this cycle of blame?
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
I think it requires a fundamental shift in perspective. We need to move away from seeing homelessness as an individual problem and recognize it as a societal issue that demands collective action.
It's not about pointing fingers. It's about shared responsibility.
Exactly.
Working together.
Yes. And that might involve bringing together government agencies, nonprofits, community groups, even the private sector.
So pooling resources.
Yeah.
Sharing expertise.
Yeah. Creating a more holistic approach.
That addresses this complex web of factors that contribute to homelessness.
Right.
Sounds like a massive undertaking.
It is a big one.
But the article also mentions the impact on Spain's tourism industry.
Right.
And that adds another layer of urgency.
Of course, because as we talked about earlier, Spain relies heavily on tourism.
Right.
And the state of their airports plays a crucial role in shaping visitors' perceptions.
Right.
So this situation, if left unchecked, could have a ripple effect on the country's economy and its reputation.
It's a reminder that these social issues, even if they seem localized, can have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, they do.
And that brings us to that second approach being considered, restricting access to the airport during certain hours.
During overnight hours?
Yeah. It's seen as less drastic than eviction.
Right.
But it raises questions about its effectiveness.
Right. Like, does it actually address the underlying issues?
Yeah.
It might make the problem less visible.
Right.
But does it actually solve anything?
It seems like a temporary fix at best.
It is like putting a bandage on a broken bone.
Exactly. And like you said earlier, pushing people out of the airport doesn't make them disappear.
Right. They're just going to go somewhere else.
They might end up in even more hidden and dangerous places.
Exactly. And that's a real concern.
Yeah.
It's important to consider the unintended consequences of any policy or intervention. And restricting access could actually make the situation worse for the homeless population by pushing them further into the margins.
It seems like we need to think beyond these short-term fixes and focus on long-term solutions that actually get at the root cause of the problem.
Absolutely.
But what does that look like in practice?
Well, it requires a multi-pronged approach. One key element is investing in affordable housing. When people have access to safe, stable, and affordable places to live, it creates a foundation for everything else, for their health, for their employment, for education.
So it's not just about providing shelter, it's about creating a system where people can actually afford to live.
Exactly, in a city like Madrid.
In a city like Madrid, right?
Which is so expensive.
Yeah, and alongside affordable housing, we need to expand access to mental health and addiction services.
Absolutely. The article highlighted how prevalent these issues are within the homeless population.
Excellent. Ross,
And it's essential to provide support to address these challenges.
So it sounds like we're talking about a pretty significant overhaul of existing systems.
It's a big one.
And a real commitment to social investment.
Yeah.
But where do we even start? It's such a complex issue with so many moving parts.
It is a daunting task.
Yeah.
But it's not insurmountable. One thing we can do is look at what's worked in other cities or countries facing similar challenges. We can learn from their successes and their failures.
So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from others who are already grappling with these issues.
Yeah, they've been doing this for a while.
So what are some examples of approaches that have shown promise?
Well, a number of cities around the world have implemented some really innovative programs. Some have focused on what's known as the housing first model. This approach prioritizes providing permanent housing
Okay.
as a foundation for stability.
So you don't have to meet certain conditions
Exactly.
or milestones
You just get housing,
to qualify for housing.
right? It recognizes housing as a fundamental human right
Interesting.
and provides it unconditionally
Okay.
as a starting point.
For people to kind of rebuild their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the evidence suggests it is very effective
Wow.
in reducing chronic homelessness
That's great.
and improving people's well-being.
That's encouraging. Are there other approaches that have shown positive results?
Another important area is harm reduction,
Okay.
particularly for those struggling with addiction.
Right.
This involves meeting people where they are
Okay.
rather than imposing unrealistic expectations
Okay.
or moral judgments.
Right.
It's about reducing the negative consequences associated with drug use,
Okay.
things like overdose or disease transmission,
Yeah.
while providing pathways to treatment and recovery.
So it's a more pragmatic approach,
Yeah.
compassionate approach that recognizes the realities of addiction,
Yes.
focuses on minimizing harm,
Exactly.
and there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Of course not.
What works in one context might not be effective in another.
Exactly. The key is to adapt programs to the specific needs of the local population.
So being flexible, innovative, and willing to learn from what's working and what's not.
Right. And perhaps most importantly, approaching this issue with empathy and compassion.
Right.
These aren't just statistics. These are real people
Yeah.
with real stories and real needs.
It's a good reminder that behind every headline, behind every policy debate,
Right.
there are human lives at stake.
Absolutely.
This conversation has given me a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the immediate challenges at the airport
Right.
to the broader systemic issues
Yeah.
that contribute to homelessness in Spain and beyond.
Yeah, it's a global issue.
We've also explored some potential solutions,
Some approaches.
approaches that have shown promise in other parts of the world.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn from other places.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what final thoughts would you leave our listeners with?
Yeah, it really has been a deep dive.
Yeah, it feels like this whole situation at Barajas Airport has become this lens through which we can examine these larger societal issues.
Right.
Homelessness, migration, the challenges of urban spaces in our increasingly interconnected world.
Yeah, what's really striking is the way it highlights that tension
Yeah.
between those two worlds, you know,
Yeah.
this smooth flow of global travel
Right.
and these often invisible struggles
Right.
of those who are marginalized or left behind.
It's almost like those two realities are colliding in this very specific location,
Yeah.
the airport, this symbol of globalization and interconnectedness.
Right.
It's also a place of refuge
Yeah.
for those seeking a better life or just trying to survive.
Right.
It makes you think about our responsibilities to one another,
It does.
both locally and globally.
How do we balance the needs of a major transportation hub,
Right.
which is so vital to the global economy,
Yeah.
with the very human needs of this vulnerable population?
Yeah, it's a question that doesn't really have easy answers.
No, it doesn't.
It's so complex.
It is.
But this conversation has at least highlighted the
Yeah.
importance of broadening our perspective.
Right.
Looking beyond our own immediate experiences.
Yeah.
And really considering the experiences of
Yeah.
those who are often overlooked.
Of those who don't have a voice.
Right, or silenced, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of this larger system, this really complex web of interconnectedness.
Absolutely.
The well-being of one affects the well-being of all,
Yeah.
whether we see it or not.
Whether we acknowledge it or not.
Exactly. And it's about finding solutions
Yes.
that acknowledge that reality,
Empathical.
solutions that are both practical and compassionate,
Right?
solutions that address the root causes of these challenges,
Yeah.
instead of just treating the symptoms.
Absolutely.
The situation at Barajas, while challenging,
Yeah.
can also be seen as a call to action. It's a reminder that we can't just turn a blind eye
Right.
to the struggles of others.
We have to face it.
We have to, yeah. And as we're wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this question of
Hmm.
what can we as individuals do
Yeah.
to make a difference?
What can we do?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed
Right.
by the scale of these issues.
They're huge.
They're huge.
But even small acts can have a ripple effect.
Okay.
As we discussed, raising awareness is crucial.
Yeah.
The more people who understand the complexities of this,
Right.
the more likely we are to find solutions.
And that involves challenging our own assumptions and biases, right?
Of course, it's about educating ourselves.
Yeah.
Listening to the stories of those with lived experience.
Right.
And advocating for policies that promote equity and justice.
Yeah. We can support organizations
Absolutely.
that are working on the front lines to provide assistance and support.
To these people.
To those in need, yeah.
To those in need.
There are so many ways to get involved, even at a local level.
Even in your own community.
Right.
You can volunteer your time, you can donate to charities.
Yeah, or just spread the word.
Exactly. It all contributes.
It all makes a difference.
To a more just and compassionate world.
And I think that's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with.
I agree.
You know, the situation at Barajas, while daunting,
Yeah.
is a reminder that even these small acts of kindness and advocacy can make a difference.
They really can.
It all comes back to that idea, interconnectedness.
Yeah.
We have a shared responsibility to care for one another.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
I hope it sparked some important conversations.
Me too.
And inspired you to think critically about these challenges facing our world.
And to remember that even in the midst of all this complexity, there's always hope.
There's always hope, yeah.
For a brighter future.
A brighter future.
We can make a difference together.
Well said. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.